Generate database. In this lecture, I will talk about how to generate the ER diagram you draw to the physical database. I will outline the steps and then I will demonstrate how to generate. Let's outline the step. First of all, you need to go to the tool menu in the toolbar and then click the DB and generate database. After that, you will see the database generation dialog box. Make sure you take the export to database option that will generate directly to the database. I will talk about different options in the rest of this lecture. And then click the database option. Then select the database you want to use. In my demonstration, I will use the MySQL, but Visual Program support a lot of database vendor. So you just go ahead with your own frequently used database and then configure the database option. Click OK and OK again to generate. Then you will see all the table is generated to the database. Let me just show you how it works. Here I have the MySQL database online photo album, and as you see, as there's no table yet in this database, then I go to the visual paradigm. Here is the online photo album ERD. We go to the tools, DB, and generate database. Now we in the generate database dialog box. Let me just take the export to database and let me just change to my document folder first. And then we go to the database options to select the database you want. I have the MySQL and the driver I downloaded previously. You can click the download to pull the driver from internet. I will talk about more about this later on. And then the host, my database is running in the same machine as this one. And the database name, let me just test. Okay, that's great. Then OK, and then I just click OK again. Then it will want only the InnoDB supports the foreign key. My database is InnoDB, so that's okay. Then just generate. You can see it executing the SQL. Now it's generated. Then I go back to the MySQL workbench. You see the table is now generated, the column is empty. Of course, I just generated from the visual paradigm. Okay, let's continue to talk about database generation options. First of all, we use the export to database. By default, this export to database is turned off. The reason is the export to database means you generate directly to the database, you connect to the database engine. And in case you don't have the database right away with you, then you don't check it, then you just generate the DDL. And because I'm doing demonstration, I generate directly. Instead of export directly to the database, you can generate the DDL. DDL stands for Data Definition Language. It is a syntax for define the database, just like create a table, drop the table. Very often, you don't have direct access to the production database. Of course, it is running day-to-day business. In this case, you better to generate a DDL and then execute the table creation script while the software is installed, or you automate the table creation process as part of your features, something like that. And in next lecture, we'll talk about how to patch the database. Is even more interesting about to execute, automate the execution. You can generate the comment and take this box. It will generate the description of the entity and the column you put before into the script. Please be reminded that not all DBMS support the comment. As far as I remember, the Microsoft SQL can run comment. The reason you put the comment is the DDL you produce may be incorporated into your source code repository. In this case, you can get a well-commented DDL is much better than just a plain SQL. The other option is very straightforward. Generate the uppercase. It's forced to generate the uppercase of all the statement. It's just to conform to your team or company standard. And formatted SQL. You can turn it on if you like to have a more human readable format. In the left hand side, you see what the DDL will produce if you don't check the format SQL. We try to generate everything in a single line, which is very efficient for machine to read, but not efficient for human to read it. If you take the formatted SQL, you will generate the SDDL like that. You have the table declaration, and then each column will have its own line and have a very clear indentation to make it easy to read by human. And the header, you can define the header for your database generation. You can add the name variable, time variable, author. Then we will fill in this variable when generate the DDL. And you can also have some custom DDL at the header, like you run the show table first, etc. You can also split the DDL into multiple files. We don't suggest to use this one, but for certain situation, maybe you need it. Then you can have a DDL just for creating the table, and another DDL for adding the foreign key. Separate, create, drop DDL. You can take this option to split the table creation statements and the drop statement into two files. It is a good practice that to avoid you to drop the production data. Please be reminded that this option is only available when you pick to drop and create database in the generate combo box. And we have a generate sample data. It is a very interesting feature. When you design the database in visual paradigm, you not only define the structure, but you can also define the data on it. Just like here, we have the photo and the data for the photo. So you can put in some predefined data. Then you may ask, why I need that? I developed a system to do the information we insert to the database. The reason we have defined the sample data is to give the developer have some ground to do the development instead of writing some basic code everyone. Imagine you develop a POS system, the point of sale system. You define the basic products in your sample data. Then when the developer load up the database, they got a 10s or 20s products. Then they can start develop the core features rather than focusing on the inventory input and editing, things like that. So you can prepare the sample data for development purpose, and then you can enable all the team have common set of sample data. Of course, for the development, you turn it on, but if you generate the DDL for production purpose, you need to turn it off. Go ahead. It's very convenient. The code SQL identifier. Database has some reserved word like select, order. This is a reserved word. If you want to use the reserved word as a column name or table name, you need to have the code to code it. Then the database know, the engine know you're referring to your column rather than a certain index of the database. So if you turn the code on, then we'll help you to code the identifier. If you're not sure what it is, please keep it octo, then we will help you to determine. However, we don't recommend you to use the reserved word, because if you use the reserved word, not just affect the DDL, it also affect how to access the database. You write the SQL, you need to code it, otherwise it will be a syntax error. So try to avoid to use the reserved word. Very common, you may use the order as a table to declare there is the sales order. So we suggest you to use sales order rather than order. The column order. By default, when you generate the DDL, the column order, we will follow the order you see in the ERD. In this case, we have the title and then the ID. Then we'll generate the title and ID. You may aware the ID is a primary key. We have a ID, the key icon here. If you want, you can ask Visual Program to generate all the key and index first, then the normal column. If you turn it on, then the ID will go before the title. The order of the column may affect how to insert the data, so make use of it carefully. Again, it's a good practice to put all the key and index in the top of your database design rather than mix it up with a normal column. That will increase the readability. DDL extension, you can define the generated file as an .ddl as extension or .sql. It totally depends on your team convention. Connection provider, it is the strategy for obtaining the JDBC connections. Visual Program use the JDBC to connect to your database server. We suggest you just leave it as it is. You don't need to manage it because it's just generate. The efficiency is not very demanding. Connection. This option is exclusive for you generate or hibernate the Java ORM class. The Visual Program not only generate the database, it also can generate the Java code for you to access the database in a totally object-oriented manner. Here you define how to access the connections. You can use the standard Java JDBC connection. You can use the data source, which is provided by the application server, or you can use the mixed strategy. Basically, you use the hibernate most likely in the application server. So the data source could be the best choice because you can share the connection pool between application. Database configuration. We'll move on to talk about how to configure database. The first things you see in the database configuration is the language. Again, it is exclusive for you generate the hibernate. If you're not going to generate the code, you just generate the database in Visual Program, just leave it, use the Java. And then you see a list of database vendor on the left hand side. You see it is a checkbox rather than an option. That means you can select more than one database you want. The allowable data type when you're doing the modeling is follow the database you select. Like if you pick the Oracle as a default database, then we will show numeric rather than integer. If you pick MySQL, we will show int, things like that. The database DDL generated syntax is based on the default database option. You can right click on the database and set it as a default. Use the pop-up menu. And then on the right hand side of the screen, you will see the version. You pick the version page close to the database engine you use. Visual Program keeps supporting the latest version of the database engine, so keep updating your Visual Program can get the best option. Choose right version, and then you pick the driver. The driver is the component for Visual Program to connect to your database. There are different driver suppliers in the market. Pick the one you use most frequently, or you use the default one from Visual Program. The driver file. JDBC is a very popular database connectivity option, and Visual Program use the JDBC to connect with your database. In order to connect your database through JDBC, you need to provide the driver. You can click the download button on the right hand side to download the driver from the provider directly. Some provider like Oracle doesn't allow to download the driver without registrations. In this case, we will show through the web page. You go there to download the driver, and then you can select the full file in the Visual Program to point to the driver file. The driver class and dialect. Driver class is related to the driver file you select, then it depends the class. The dialect is for the Hibernate to talk to the database. Hibernate is a very sophisticated persistent framework. It supports different dialect for optimization of speeds, optimization of the response time, things like that. So you define different dialect. Of course, we suggest you to keep use the default one first until you understand what you are doing. And then the connection URL, you specify the connection detail to your database. This connection information only useful if you select export to database. Username and password, enter the correct username and password. You may see the engine if you use the MySQL or MariaDB, and you pick the right engine to use. The most commonly used engine is the InnoDB. We suggest to use InnoDB. It has the foreign key support, constraint support. Then you can click the test connection to test. Make sure the connection value you fill in is correct. If you haven't tested the connection, then you generate export the database. You will get the error message. Now we move on a very interesting topic: personal and production database connectivity. Database, as we mentioned before, is the key component of an information system. You store all the long-term data in the database. Typically, you will have two databases. One is the development, then the other one is the production. To keep the system stable, your team need to work on the development rather than on the productions. Otherwise, some mistake will be damaged the user immediately. So you will do the work on the development, you will make the change and revert your change. After you test all the change, you will put your development into the production. Then you can patch the production database based on the development. Then we have a development database and production database. In Visual Paradigm, you can define the production connectivity and the development connectivity as a personal. Why we say it's a personal? It is based on different developer. The production settings will be saved together with the database, together with the project, and then when you commit to the teamwork server, the production setting will stay in server. But the personal setting does not send to the server. The reason behind is every developer will have their own IP address, database name, login username, password. It doesn't make sense to commit the personal information into the teamwork server. Then the personal information will stay with your machine. It's very convenient. Then when you when you need to roll out your software, you just change the production and generate again. Let's summarize what we talked about in this lecture. We overview to generate the option and show you how to generate the database and how to configure the database and the setting of the production and personal database connectivity for different purposes.